Hello and welcome to Soundcheck by Support Act. This is Luke from Support Act, and today I'm joined by Jeremy Furze. How are you, Jeremy?
G'day, Luke. I'm well, thank you.
We're all about discussing mental health and well-being within the music industry. And most importantly, I want to get out there the message that our Support Act Wellbeing Helpline is available on 1-800-959-500, and that's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And as a part of new federal funding from the government, we are now extending that service to the entire arts sector. So if you work in the arts sector and you're experiencing some kind of issue related to your work or a mental health problem, make sure you contact 1-800-959-500. The second bit of admin is that Support Act is currently administering a crisis relief grant fund for COVID-19. So if you feel like you have been hit financially and are in need of financial support, make sure you go to our website and click on Get Help and fill out the form and see if you are eligible for some crisis relief funding. So, Jeremy, how has lockdown been for you?
Well, as a manager, you're often working on your own. So, in a lot of ways...
Sorry, before you go on, I should probably mention, Jeremy is the owner of Applejack Music Management, part owner of the Bridge Hotel in Castlemaine, which is a fine drinking and performing establishment. I can attest to that. And is also the manager, as part of his work with Applejack, of Teskey brothers, Little Quirks and Liz Stringer. So, lockdown, how's it looked for you?
So, I mean, it's obviously interesting, and it's been a really, really strange time for everyone, far and wide. Mm-hmm. But I guess as a manager, the interesting part for me was that, you know, while a lot of people had to confront the idea of working on their own in a room, at home or wherever that what might be, to me that was par for the course, because that's what I'm used to. Managers are often basically, you know, on their own. If they have staff, they might be lucky to have staff. I'm lucky to have a staff member, but so I work sort of used to working a little bit with my assistant Al, but in general, I'm in this office on my own. So, yeah, I mean, in terms of the lifestyle, actually, it's remained fairly consistent. Obviously, without being able to go to gigs at night, but in terms of the work, it's been a very interesting and challenging time. It's been, as a manager, you know, you are very closely linked to the live music part of the industry and also the recorded music part of the industry. And so it's interesting to watch, you know, those two sides of the industry figuring things out. And, you know, artists and managers sort of sit in between all that. We were kind of lucky with my artists, my roster, that we didn't have to cancel, I guess, what I would consider any humongous opportunities. The Teskey brothers had a bit of a break planned. There was a baby arriving. Little Quirks had planned to go to the Great Escape to showcase in the UK, and that obviously fell through, which is a shame. But you know, I'm very hopeful we'll be able to return next year and take advantage of that opportunity. And Liz String has been writing a lot this year, with a record to come out next year. So it's not been the worst time personally for my business and for those artists, in comparison to many others that I'm aware of and have been highly publicised.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but I always looked, you know, as a follower of the Teskey brothers' career for some time, looking at this recent period and how they had just done this enormous world tour, put out numerous releases, done 4 nights at the Forum, and then managed to tie it all up just as lockdown seemed to happen. I don't know if that's how it happened, but that's amazing. It's like maybe they really had downtime. Maybe that's where it all began, out in Warrington.
It's a very astute observation, Luke, and it's true that the Teskeys have this magical way of falling on their feet, and bless them for it. I guess the other part of that magical scenario is that during that tour we did at the end of the year, we actually recorded four nights of the tour, and mix that into a live album, which we'd planned to release this year. And it turns out that the middle of a global pandemic is a really good time to release a live album.
Yeah.
When people can't go to shows. So we ended up with having a live album right in the middle of it, which really, was a great thing to have. But yeah, it's funny how they always seem to land on their feet.
And was that your first ARIA #1 album?
It was. Yeah, their album of last year came in at #2 behind Ed Sheeran. And so it was amazing.
He's always there. He's always there.
Oh, he's always there. He'll never be beaten.
He's haunting everybody. He's always there at #1.
So yeah, any year when Ed Sheeran doesn't release music, it's a good chance for the rest of the world to have a go at #1.
Absolutely. Well, obviously, you would have worked hard to get to where you are now, and I'm interested to hear a little bit more of your story. But, I think it's something that a lot of other, managers or artists who are tuning in today would like to know how you look after yourself. It's a big job being a manager. Maybe you want to talk about a little bit some of the challenges you face, particularly around your own mental health and well-being, and how you have dealt with those challenges.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I guess I've been a manager now for 4 years. Prior to that, I had a lot of experience working alongside managers in a financial capacity at labels and at festivals as well. And so I was very familiar with the nature of the industry, however, not too intimately familiar with, I guess, some of the more intimate challenges of managing people within the context of music. And so it was a real eye-opener to me when I began working with the Teskey brothers, just how sort of intense it can get and how much emotion can play into your working life. Now that's emotion from myself, because I get very emotionally involved in a project. As a manager, you can't not, and you try not to, but you do. And the artists themselves, of course, are also very emotionally involved in their project, and the hours are long and late for both artist and manager, and it's a real test of everyone's character to be able to work together and to manage the job. And
do you mean that being in close contact with people all the time can create kind of tense situations from time to time?
From time to time, amongst the band, amongst an artist or the band, that's true. But also, I guess, individually, and probably more so individually, members of a band go through their own, their own story and their own trials, and everyone has their own, I guess, their own challenges that they have to overcome. I think family plays a massive part in it, and when you travel a lot, and you have a family at home, that is a big challenge for anyone. Doesn't matter if you're just starting out with your first tour or you are, a really high profile artist doing big stadium tours. It's challenging for everyone at every level, and I think, for me and my family, I have 2 children and a wife and 2 children, and all of a sudden I was thinking about a job way more than I ever had before, and I was taking on quite a lot of, I guess, the mental stress of being responsible for this thing that's blowing up, as it went, and it moved really quick.
Bigger than you probably have ever, and quicker than you would ever be able to guess, I imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. It went faster than I predicted. I did know this band was going to, be very well received, but I didn't expect it to move as quick, particularly internationally. So So there was a lot of decisions to make early on that were big decisions. There were a lot of label offers on the table. There was quite a few publishing offers on the table. And we were putting together a team of booking agents around the world. And I had just started up with this band, and all of a sudden I'm responsible for advising them on what is a good decision. And a signing like that, you know, it's maybe 3 albums, maybe 4 albums, a good chunk of your life, a good 5 years of your career, the most important 5 years of your career. So there's a lot of responsibility, and I, you know, I had a lot of anguish over sort of making sure that was done right and done well, and it was a really stressful time with a lot of late nights, a lot of phone calls with New York or London to make sure that the deals were the way we wanted them. And you know, at the time I was learning as well, which is always a challenge. You know, always adds a level of stress. You know, if it had been an artist that I'd you know, if I'd been my 4th artist that I'd managed, and I'd been through the process of signings before, I'm sure I would have coped with it much better. But at the time it was really stressful. And so how did I deal with that? Well, I guess not very well at the time. And I was lucky to have friends within the management community. The Australian Association of Managers is a wonderful organisation, and linked me with, you know, many other people who were more experienced or had been through similar situations. And I was able to reach out to people and have chats, coffees with lots of people, you know, managers like Dave Batty and Kath Harity and Bill Cullen, and people at Alistair Burns, all these people who, you know, who I really looked up to and respected, and the process of talking with them actually was a massive help. One of the biggest lessons I learned was from Bill Cullen. You know, it's about keeping your priorities in mind, and don't forget family and good people, you know, and focus on those 2 things. If you forget your family, you can work 24 hours a day around the clock, and you'll fall apart.
He radiates that atypical manager that's just very relaxed and very grounded.
Yeah.
In my one meeting I've had with him, it's like he seems like the perfect manager for someone like Paul Kelly, and similar artists to Teskey brothers, I guess, you know, quite down to earth, grounded artists, and he seems like the perfect fit. And I guess that's kind of why you and the Teskeys work well together. Yeah.
Well, I look up to Bill a lot, and I guess, you know, you can get caught up in your own world and forget that everyone's been through this before, or you know, every manager of an artist that's going in this direction, up this trajectory, has been through this before. So you know, it's just something you've got to work through and figure out a way of managing it, and you get tips along the way. And I guess once I established something of a routine and was strict about keeping to it, in terms of not working, you know, late every night, and trying to get, you know, some start and finish times of my day in some sort of routine.
Not always easy.
That made me feel like I was in control of what I was doing, and then I think that in turn just gave me the confidence that I was, you know, actually making the right decisions, and I was a good operator. Up until that point, it felt like it was just haphazardly just bashing through an endless pile of emails and work, and wondering where does this end, and I can't turn away from it. I can't switch it off. I can't, you know, even if I do go home and see the family, it's like you're still sitting up there, and
yep.
You know, I think I still struggle with that, and I think everyone does, but I think that learning how to learning how to focus on your day and organize your time across the day, and then finish your day, and then separate and go and do something else, whether it's a walk, a meal, a drink, a movie. It's really important to have that time. And management is just a piece of string. You could just keep going forever with trying to find more opportunities for your artists. There's no end to it. And whether it's looking for a sync, for a song, or trying to tee up a co-writing session, there's endless opportunities out there. And so you need to decide what are the most important and focus on those, rather than just being overwhelmed by everything in front of you.
You bring up a couple of really great points there, and some stuff that we've been working on at Support Act with other people in the industry. That idea that mentoring for people, particularly managers, is so important in establishing that network, that professional network that makes you feel like I'm making the right choices and I feel supported. So it sounds like that's what's kind of really supported you. But the other thing, and it was something that Sahara Herald, who's the tour director of Frontier, said in a previous sound check, which was just being able to say no, and that no is a complete sentence, and that you've got to start establishing a routine where, it doesn't have to always be the show must go on. I've just got to get shit done. Because I can even say, as someone who's just come off the back of being a business owner and booking agent for the last 8 years, that working for Support Act has its challenges, but one of the greatest things I wanted to establish was that, kind of work hours. And I already know that I feel better for it, that I'm not just 24 hours a day, 7 days a week thinking, right, what else have I got to do? I've got contracts, I've got this and that and the other thing going on. So that's really good advice. The other thing about touring, you mentioned about touring and being away from your family. How do you stay healthy and focused when you're in that environment, particularly on the length of time that you probably spent overseas last year?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think a lot about this in the context of the artist, because they're spending more time than I am. Mm-hmm. As a manager, there's some pretty key moments that you've got to attend. When the band plays LA, New York, London, where, there's some pretty great opportunities to attend conferences around the world. I've been lucky that I've spent, a fair amount of time, but it doesn't feel like I've overdone it on that front.
Hasn't gotten tired already?
No, it's still fun. It's still fun. And it I guess it depends on the scope of the trip. There have been trips, I went to LA for 24 hours last year.
Wow. That's got to be some kind of record, Jeremy. That's a short time. We'll have to get Michael Gudinski on the phone, but I'm sure that's got to be a record.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. It was a valuable experience, and I made that decision not to extend the trip because I knew I didn't need to, and that's what worked for me.
So there were all temptations to want to extend, though.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But I mean, you really got to have some time to go for a walk and separate. You might think, I'm over here for a limited time, I've got to take advantage of every minute, but that's not sustainable, and you're not going to have great meetings with people if you're just dead on your feet. So I think it's really important to schedule time off, whether it's here or abroad. For the artists on the road, they've got more of a routine because they've got the show and the sound check and the travel. Mm-hmm. And that's largely dictated by their mode of travel. If they're in a bus where they can sleep, well, that's a game changer, and suddenly they can find a real rhythm with that. If you're just a step back from that and you're in a splitter van and hotels, well, that's a real challenge, that is. And when you add a few flights in there as well, early morning flights, it's damn near impossible to maintain, perfect health on that, in that schedule. But there's lots of things obviously you can do, and I'm a big advocate for sort of planning in advance on the food and drink front. And if you feel like something's going to help you in the form of a juice or some healthy food or a different kind of food, you can actually get your tour manager, or you can get involved and look ahead and sort of plan some of this stuff. You've got not much time, but there's very few places in the world right now where, within half an hour, you can't get to something healthy and make it happen. It's just that often
something about mindfulness is just that getting out of that monotony and the stereotype of just eating badly unplanned meals all the time and drinking ciders and whatever.
Yeah. So I think that makes a big difference on the health and the mood of the group as well.
Yep.
So
will have that impact. Yeah. Well, I mean, you've got so many big challenges in your life. It's not many people in the world who choose to take on owning a pub, starting a management company, and also managing, one of Australia's biggest musical exports all at the same time. Like, how do you juggle all of those priorities, and not that's also excluding your family? How do you make the time? Are you good at scheduling? Or
I've had to get good at scheduling. I think, one thing about having kids is they don't care. They don't know what I'm doing or necessarily care too much. They are young, and they just need a parent. So
either there or
so that keeps me fairly real in terms of, like, it reminds me that life is fragile, and not all of my work problems are the biggest problems in the world. And I've actually, I think, parenting takes so much time, and you lose sleep and all that. But at the same, on the other side of the coin, I think it offers you this grounding as a human that gives you perspective on everything throughout your working life, where you suddenly you don't get too dragged into the world and overcome, because you've got to be a parent, and that's what's important. That's number one. And I think outside of that, running a venue, I don't actually, I'm not hands-on with the pub, other than just overseeing. My brother Pat is, he's much more hands-on than me, and we're business partners. We've got a good balance there. And adding more artists to the roster meant, I guess, committing to taking on an employee, and I guess delegating more work, and delegating more has been really good for me. Every time I've done it, I've gone, why didn't I do that sooner? So yeah, learning how to sort of, I guess, manage the tasks as it goes is been sort of I'd say I'm 4 years in and still learning, but starting to get a real handle on it now. The one thing that I think is really the biggest challenge as a manager is that you can predict a lot of things, and when the tour is coming, and what needs to happen ahead of that to plan, and when the release is coming, and what needs to happen ahead of that. But what you don't know is how your artist is going to be feeling, and what they might be going through personally, and what needs to happen in response to that. And I think it's very important. It's probably one of the most important roles I have, is to ensure that the individuals as artists and as individuals and as partners and
humans,
parents and humans, feel feel like they have what they need. And what they need isn't necessarily to continue their career on a steady upward trajectory. It might be they need some time off, or they need to talk about something at length and work through some issues within the band or outside the band. And it's really, it is an important role to make sure that those things are not just pushed aside. We give it the time. We allow time to talk about things and make sure that everyone's heard and feels like they're getting what they want out of the project. And that for me has been a real, challenge. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a mental health professional. And I would never want to sort of give anyone medical advice on any level, but I have, had conversations where I've advised Brendan from the Teskey brothers. He's been, he's spoken openly about, stepping off a tour before, and we had that conversation for quite a while before he made the decision, and then he decided not to do it. So, and I respect him deeply for it, but it was a very new and challenging time to go through that process, and completely unexpected, and that's what you have to allow time for, I guess, as a manager.
Absolutely. Well, you preempted my question, which was the greatest challenge of being a manager, and that's kind of based around my conversations with managers. There's always, and as someone who's booked artists before, managing artists can be quite difficult. Would you say that's the greatest challenge of being a manager, or is dealing with labels harder than artists?
No, dealing with labels is the easy part. I mean, the legal stuff, I still scratch my head, but most of the questions you come across as a manager, if it's a day-to-day issue, chances are someone is going to have dealt with it, and you can ask around and what does this clause mean in this publishing contract, or how did you manage to get that whole stadium tickets sold out?
Yeah,
and it's like there's always a way of getting advice about.
How did you win that Grammy award?
Yeah, how did you win that Grammy?
We kind of touched on it already, but I guess for managers who are tuning in, like managing artists who are having mental health and well-being issues, have you got any small piece of advice for how a manager might approach that or support an artist?
I guess as a manager, the temptation is to focus on the business side of things.
Mm-hmm.
And often when you're making a decision about how to play the next period of time, there's a business case that you look at. And I guess one thing that doesn't come up when you're talking about the business case is, what is this going to feel like when we're actually doing that tour? And it's not that it doesn't come up because I'm not thinking about it or the artist isn't thinking about it. It's just, it doesn't come up because we just haven't really committed the time and forethought to properly give it consideration. And I think that you learn these things as you go. You make mistakes. You go, well, we probably shouldn't route a tour as intensively as that, or we shouldn't, do 2 fly dates in a row, or whatever it is. And you just pick up some rules as you go. But I think that the main thing is just when you're looking at the business case, also look at the health case, and just decide, is this something that you really, is this going to be detrimental to your health in any way to do this? And there might be many reasons, not just mental health, physical health. It might be detrimental to your relationships. It might be, that you really at that time are better off spending your energy writing songs instead of touring your old songs. There's lots of arguments, and there's no right or wrong answer. And I think it's just important to not always just go, well, here's an offer, and it's a juicy offer on the table down, to go and do that. Let's also think at the same time as making that decision, let's think about how we're going to be feeling, how your year's panning out, how things are, going with you in general. So that's one step that I think probably a lot of people overlook, and it's a valuable one.
Jeremy, thank you so much for joining me on Soundcheck today. That's Jeremy Furze from Applejack Music Management, manager of Teskey Brothers, Liz Stringer, Little Quirks, part owner of the Bridge Hotel in Castlemaine. Thank you so much for joining us. And if you're still with us, make sure if you're in need of support, you contact 1-800-959-500 for the Support Act Wellbeing Helpline. It's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And also check out our website, click on Get Help if you're experiencing a financial crisis due to COVID-19 to apply for one of our crisis relief grants. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.